This is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast. This is VP. We are a solutions-based podcast, diving into the world of contrarian investing and alternative finance. You can find us hosted on the No Nonsense Forex YouTube channel, nononsenseforex.com, and podcast players everywhere. Episode 212 is brought to us by Bybit. You know, if you're not super happy with your broker or you just want better incentives to trade, you just simply want to get more, you can migrate everything you do right now over to Bybit because you can trade everything on Bybit right now. Please don't migrate from Blueberry Markets. They love you. But if you're anywhere else, Bybit lets you trade Forex, metals, stocks, crypto, of course, all right there, and you get so much more for it. Go down to the description, to the show notes. Click the link to the Bybit blog. That keeps you updated on everything going on. So you can read it and see if it's for you. And then my affiliate link is at the very bottom. If you click that link and get signed up, you are plugged into this rewards ecosystem like nobody else. If you're already actively trading, Bybit absolutely hooks up active traders because with Bybit membership has its rewards. It is the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast, and one of my favorite questions I ever got asked, you guys know me, I generally hate questions because of PTSD from the early days of No Nonsense Forex, but we did here on the 10-Minute Contrarian Podcast, our very first Q&A episode we ever did, I got this question, and it asked, what are the things you are the most bullish on in 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years down the road? And I think this question was asked about 2 years ago. And the answer I had for 2 years ahead was Bitcoin. Crushed it. Then for 5 years ahead, it was silver. And I think we can almost declare victory on that at this point. Contrarians, we absolutely kill it here. By the way, in terms of getting in on a lot of these things early, we take some losses here, but very few, and our wins are gigantic. So if anybody out there is new, you are in the right place. And this episode is going to be a testament to the reasons why we are so successful here. And fans of the show should know what my answer was for the 10 years ahead question. I even alluded to it on X this past week, or I think it was yesterday. Yeah, I think it was yesterday. And we will be talking about this very shortly. But I want everybody to know what's going on in the world right now if it wasn't already obvious. Because I don't know how much appropriate news you guys consume. Most people just consume the most garbage, pointless, doesn't do you any good news of all time, just so they can get all upset about it. I've never liked to take that approach. I like to pay attention to news that is useful and can make me a lot of money. And then I like to take this information and pass it on to you. Because believe you me, and we will be talking about this probably in next week's episode, but we have certainly talked about it before, the world is going to be a very ugly place for those who are not financially secure. So you have to get in early to things on the offensive side. And to do that, you have to understand what's going on in the world. Now, in the first half of the 2020s, we had a lot of stories. The first half of the 2020s was way more exciting than people were probably ready for and more than people probably wanted. But without knowing the future for the next 5 years, what I can say is almost certainly one of the major stories in the entire world is going to be the race for critical minerals. Now, we here at the podcast have been well ahead of this, and I'm sure a lot of sovereign nations have been as well, but it's just now becoming an actual story. And mainly because one of the things you do have to give Donald Trump credit for is he understands this, or at least somebody in his administration understands this enough to where he is really, really taking action. And I'm telling you right now, contrarians, as somebody who studies this space and invests in this space and watches this space very closely, there is nothing stupid about this endeavor. People may not like the way he's going about it. Okay, fine. Is there a proper way to go about this? Is there a way that's going to satisfy everybody? Of course not. Is there going to be a faction of people out there who flip out and over-criticize every single move he makes, no matter what it is, even if it's brilliant? Of course there is. So you just have to do whatever makes the most sense to you. But I'm very happy to see somebody at least attack this problem and start doing something about it, because this is vital to the overall prosperity and security of a nation's future. Because guess what? There are certain minerals out there which are in quite short supply, but very high demand for the things that countries want to do going forward. In the next 5-10 years, who are going to be the countries who actually industrialize and grow further in industry and technology and everything? It's not going to be everybody. We already know that entire regions of the world are going to be forced to go the other way and deindustrialize, as we have already seen. And as history has shown us, if you are going the other way as opposed to going the correct way, the world is a big, ugly place for you. You need some degree of power and leverage and relevancy. And it's really going to come down to, do you possess things that the powerful and developing nations simply cannot do without? If the answer is yes, you're going to be fine. If the answer is no, then you're going to really be in a bad position. You will now be entering every negotiation from a position of weakness. And that's just not going to look good for you. It's not going to look good for your citizens either. And if you think what I'm saying right now is incorrect, I'm telling you, it's not. It is correct, and the entire world understands this. And it is why they're committing so much money and so much time and so many resources into securing critical minerals, in particular two. Well, one is an overall type. And we'll start with that one. And this is not a stranger to the 10-Minute Contrarian podcast. We've spoken about this before, but it's going to be rare earths. Worldwide, in the global newscape, rare earths was not spoken about a whole lot up until this past year. We were talking about it. We understood the importance. But it's almost as if a switch just came on, and now the entire world understands the importance and is like all at one time doing as much as they possibly can to secure what they have and secure pipelines with other countries in order to protect their future. Now, why is this such a problem? Well, because you have to have rare earths to do so many things in the present day and in future day, in particular in the defense industry. And if you cannot protect yourself, then it doesn't really matter what you have, because somebody's just going to come in and steal it. This is what we've done for thousands of years. And as things become more scarce, and as entire countries start to rely on things like this, and when you factor in the collapse of globalism, and when you factor in population collapse, and when you factor in countries forced to deindustrialize, desperation is going to go up. And do you think this makes the threat of war go up or down? It goes way up. And we are going to see more of it. Now, nobody really wants to go to war, but if you have the weaponry, or if you simply don't, but you do own a good share of critical metals that other people might need, they are going to protect you, and you are going to be fine. You're going to make it through. But again, this isn't just talk and bluster. This is real action taking. I mean, why else in one of President Trump's first few days in office did he talk about wanting to buy Greenland? We dedicated a whole episode to this. Why on earth would anybody want to just up and buy Greenland? Nobody wanted to do that before. Why now? It's because of the rare earths they have. See, the problem is China owns like 90% of all rare earths. They are so mineral rich. And to be able to give themselves leverage on a global scale, because I don't know if you knew this, but most countries don't like China. They have done a great job securing what they do have and making sure the world depends on them. And demand for rare earth metals is only going to get bigger. When we just signed the big beautiful bill in the United States, Part of that was a project called the Golden Dome Project, which is a missile defense system for the United States. That's going to take a ton of rare earths. You can sit there and debate if we need this or not, but it doesn't matter. It's here. It's coming. It will get built. And countries all over the world have taken huge steps recently. This has not just been happening. This has primarily been happening in 2025. But the United Kingdom, for example, has been, this is the one thing that has been going on. They have been building their own rare earth mining facility. It's the only one in their country, but they've dedicated a lot of resources to it. India wants to be a big player in the next 20, 30 years of existence. They certainly don't want to be left out here. They have dedicated over $160 million to rare earth mining in their own country. The United States and holders of the stock I recommended back in the Greenland episode, MP Materials. Do you guys wonder why it doubled since I mentioned it? Well, one, for obvious reasons, it's the only game in town in a country that desperately needs rare earths. It's a huge slam dunk investment. But in the meantime, the United States Department of Defense has become a majority shareholder in it by spending over $200 million on it. So tell me again your case for rare earth metals not being important. The United States even turned a coal mine in Wyoming into a rare earth mining facility. Now people are like, oh, that's great. Well, if you know anything about mining, it's going to be probably 8 to 10 years before we even really get any type of rare earths out of the ground in this thing. So these things are going to be scarce for a very long time, regardless of what anybody's doing. So any exposure you can get here is probably going to be good exposure going forward. Even, and again, not financial advice, in a stock like MP Materials, which has doubled. I mean, we always look 5-10 years ahead on the show. Do you think something like that is going to go up or down? The only game in town in a country who desperately needs rare earths more than any other country in the world. Even if that Wyoming mine does go online in the next 5 years, even if the United States does buy Greenland, these things don't just solve themselves right away. Mining metals takes time. And guess where most of the processing happens, no matter where the metal is actually mined? China. Because metals processing is a very, very dirty business, and most countries do not want to do it on their own soil. China, as a lot of us know, doesn't really care about the environment, or even if they do, they care about their own prosperity first. They'll deal with the whole clean air and clean water stuff later. But that was an actual quote from Xi Jinping, and I'm paraphrasing it, but he pretty much said, hey, make as much money as you possibly can first, and then the rest will take care of itself. It's actually kind of a good quote. When you're rich and you have leverage, everything else becomes a lot easier in this world. And he's not wrong. But that's what's going on in the rare earth space. So much to the point where huge, rich countries are taking actions they have never taken before. And I think this will continue to be a major story in the remaining 5 years of this decade. The main questions you have to ask yourself is, do you think this is going to make the cost of these metals go higher or lower? And is investing in this space a good idea or a bad idea? You guys know where I lean on this. Now, the other metal is probably pretty obvious here, especially if you know my answer to what I think is going to be what I'm the most bullish on 10 years going forward. That's obviously going to be copper. We've known it here for a long time, and now the world is catching on because of the actions these countries are making towards copper as well. It's almost like the entire world just woke up one day. I was like, oh, holy shit, these things are rare? It's like, yeah, we've been talking about it for years here. And with copper, to kind of refresh everybody's memory here, supply is not great. Most copper mines are very old. Permitting takes a very long time. And once you're permitted, it's just one of those metals that takes longer to mine than others. Now, with copper is a very typical offset to where, if you're mining for gold or silver or zinc or something like that, then copper is going to come along with it, which is great, but not a very dependable way to mine copper. You want actual copper mines, and there's just not a whole lot of those. And the countries where most of the copper is can be a bit unstable at times. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the overall demand for what the world wants to do going forward is going to include so much copper, and we don't have enough to supply it. I've been saying this, again, really ever since this podcast has been in existence, almost 4 years now. Actually, yeah, it's about 4 years. And again, the world is just now waking up to this. If anybody out there watches the price of spot copper, you might have noticed that it spiked a lot recently. Now, why was this? It's because Donald Trump has decided to put big tariffs on copper for anybody in the United States who might get the wise idea to export their copper to other countries. This is something called export controls. Now, why would you do this? Because you want to keep as much copper as you possibly have. Duh. I don't know, maybe it's actually really, really important. And for anybody who wants to jump around and rant and rave about any of these tariffs, just know that every other country in the world does the exact same thing. Now, you don't hear about it in the news, wonder why, but it absolutely happens because countries like China have been doing the exact same thing. The demand is that great simply for reindustrializing going forward. I mean, in China right now, I heard that they've pretty much gotten half the population on EVs in terms of half the population that drives, and they do not have adequate charging stations for them yet. These charging stations, or really anything involving electricity, is going to need lots of copper. So for the industrial purposes now and the industrialization of the future is going to require so much copper, and we haven't even talked about AI yet. There's a reason for that. I am dedicating probably 2 full episodes just to AI, and programming alert here. As long as nothing really crazy happens in this next coming week or the next 2 weeks, those AI episodes are probably going to be the next episodes you hear here on the podcast. So we will certainly get there. No need to jump ahead of me here. I'm very much aware. But spoiler alert, copper's involved. And just like the title says, contrarians, the race is on to not only secure what we have, but to make sure we have pipelines going forward in the future. Now, again, when there is great demand for something and rising demand for something, but that something is in limited supply, I don't know, Bitcoin, what does that do to the price over time? And we are in a very good point in our history, contrarians, because the price of the underlying metal typically goes up before the price of the mining stocks do. For those of you in the gold and silver mining space, you have seen this yourselves. You might have asked yourself many times, why the price of gold and silver is going up? Why aren't my mining stocks going up? Well, it's because they take time. There's a lag. But as you know, and we have a lot of us have gotten the opportunity to see this play out in real time with our stocks, they do eventually move. And when they do, they really move. Now with copper, the first part has already happened. Now in the past, we have seen copper go up and then go right back down. You have to decide if this move we're seeing currently is going to be the catalyst for the real move up, or if we're going to see a little bit of a pullback, or if we're going to go all the way back down to the 3s. We're currently in the 5s right now. I would think with this race being officially on, that we're probably not going to drop too much further in the overall price of copper, barring a recession. During a recession, building generally stops, so anything involved with building other things typically goes down. I get that. But apart from this, it could be up only with the overall price of spot copper, which means that you will only have so much time to secure your copper mining positions. So if you have been delaying and holding off and making excuses as to why you have no exposure in your portfolio, you tell me, would now be a good time to start reevaluating? If you think the answer is yes, let me go ahead and kind of move into more of the solutions portion of this particular episode and tell you kind of what the copper landscape is looking like right now for an investor. Now, as far as immediate demand goes, countries like the United States and China are generally fine. Because I can tell you in the United States, at least, the numbers out of China, who knows, they're never accurate anyway. But in the United States, from what they're saying, is that 40% of all copper in the U.S. is recycled. Now, in China, I'm sure a lot of that is too, especially because they built a lot of ghost cities. And if there's any benefit to that, at the very least, you can go in and pillage the copper. and recycle it that way. But places where you can go in and pillage don't last forever. That's also a finite resource. And again, too, for what we are planning in the next 5, 10, 15 years, no matter what, we don't have the copper for it. It's going to have to come from somewhere. Now, where are those places? Well, we've spoken in the past that Peru and Chile and China are the 3 biggest places for copper. In terms of being able to invest and what's best for the actual world, China, forget it. So that leaves Peru and Chile, and like most countries in South America, those 2 countries historically have loved to vote for socialist candidates. And this immediately screws up everything. The approval rating drops down to like the 20s and the 10s, and then they end up voting for somebody else, and then 4 years later they vote for the socialist guy again. Like you could set your watch to this shit. I don't know what's wrong with this entire continent. But this is important in terms of mining, because back when I did a video on copper, there was a new president in Peru, and I even said, like, this guy's going to be a nightmare, and I got pushback on it, and he was, and he fucked over the entire country, especially the mining resources, and they promptly got rid of him. But now in Chile, they voted for a young socialist, because what a great idea that would be, right? Well, their mining industry took a huge hit. Now, the taxes on mining before Gabriel Boric came in was in the mid-20s. And overnight, during his presidency, this percentage went up to 46%. Let's take the one industry that gives our country a global relevancy over everybody else, and let's just give it the huge fuck you because I'm an environmentalist. That's what happened. Now, usually when people run on those platforms, it's not because they love the environment, it's because they want to steal money. Don't believe me? I could give you examples on top of examples, but let's stay in Chile, shall we? So the tax hike I'm referring to was called the 2023 Mining Royalty Law. Now, those of you who understand the mining business, you know what royalties are. And you might be asking in this particular situation, okay, so it's the Royalties Act. What company are these mines paying a royalty to? That's weird. This royalty went straight to the Chilean government. Now, is this a traditional royalty where the government actually paid these mines to do things and to expand? And so now you have this symbiotic relationship? No, they do what socialists always do. They pretend like they're going to help people, but behind the scenes, they steal as much money as possible, making themselves as rich as humanly possible, while giving the actual people just enough to keep them on life support and keep them dependent, so they will have no choice but to vote for socialism again. Lather, rinse, repeat. But anyway, rant over, that is what's currently going on. Now, there are elections this year at the end of 2025 in Chile, and the more right-leaning candidate is in the lead in the polls. And so for the mining industry, at least, that is a good thing. Problem is, his opponent is a full-blown communist. Like, what are we doing here? Certain countries and certain places in the world are just suicidal. But let's hope, for once, common sense prevails here. There will be better opportunities for companies who operate mines in Chile. Now, you might say, well, I don't have access to the Chilean stock market. You don't need it because a lot of these mines are owned by companies in other countries, which you will have access to. It just takes a little bit of research on your part. And with AI, this has just gotten exponentially easier. But while we're here, let me help the process along a little more. If you want to stay in countries who don't like to vote for communism overall, United States does have some copper prospects, mostly in the state of Arizona. Arizona is very hot right now, and they're trying to speed up permitting in this state to get a lot of these copper mines online because, for obvious reasons, they know how badly we're going to need it. This is a big reason of why this was not a huge story for the first 5 years of this decade, is because we're still kind of shaking that energy and mining is bad because of climate change stench off of us. It was dying, but it was still a narrative, and it was still affecting policy. And in current day Chile, it still is. But in a lot of countries, it's not anymore. And there are opportunities there. But these opportunities, even though they're in great jurisdictions and that the price of these stocks might just go up on that alone, they're still smaller, more speculative stocks. And so be careful with these and make sure you have larger stock exposure. And with these larger stocks, know what you own, know where these mines are, know what the over percentages of all these metals are as well, because you're going to find a lot of your great copper plays in the big mining sector. We've done a whole episode on this. We've talked about big miners many times since that episode. But let me go ahead and give you some extra alpha for those who have stuck around till the end of the show. This has become a reoccurring theme here, and I love it. First off, understand that, like we talked about with rare earths, most of these metals are not refined in the actual countries they are mined for environmental reasons. With copper, man, I almost get it. Smelting copper is so disgusting, and you are going to pollute the ever-loving shit out of whatever water supply you decide to smelt copper into. And environmentally, it's going to be a very unfortunate event. However, there are two big miners out there which actually own their own copper smelter. One of them is Rio Tinto, ticker symbol RIO, which we have talked about many times in the past. And the other one is one we have not mentioned. It was not in the Big Miners episode, but certainly belongs in that category. This is going to be Freeport-McMoRan, ticker symbol FCX. Freeport is a major player in the global metal space, especially with nickel, which we have not talked about much on this show. There may be an episode for that later, but those are going to be your two large miners who have their own smelters, and that, I think there is a huge advantage to that, because this really, over time, will help with costs. I mean, if you have to ship your metal over to China, who is not going to be friendly cost-wise, and then have to ship it back, that's a lot of extra money factored into the overall calculus. Now, take that extra cost away. Take it out of the equation. What does that look like? It looks a lot better, especially because you can make money with those smelters, smelting copper for other companies as well. There's absolutely nothing stopping China from saying, not only are we keeping all of our copper, we are going to now refuse to smelt any of yours. So companies who already have their own processors, I think, is a big plus. It's one of the reasons, you guys know the one uranium stock I own, if you've been paying attention to the show. It's Energy Fuels, ticker symbol UUUU, because they are the only mine in North America that has their own mill. And I think that's a really big deal. Also, some added alpha for you. They are talking about using that mill to help process rare earths as well. Glad you stuck around to the end, aren't you? You know what, but let me give you one more. One of the really big players in the metal space that I don't think we've talked about hardly at all on this show, who is also very copper heavy, is going to be Teck Resources, ticker symbol TECK. From what I know of their portfolio as well, they also have some smaller metals, maybe not rare earths in particular, but pretty essential metals in their portfolio as well, that you barely see anywhere else. So as a really nice comprehensive play, that might be something too. And again, contrarians, go to your monthly chart and see where these things are. See which levels they might be approaching. You might be pretty excited at what's going on right now. That's all I'm going to say. But I will say one more thing here. If it's not obvious, you want to be investing in things that people want. And when the entire world wants them, you really want to make sure you are taking part in this as well. I mean, I cannot think of a bigger tailwind or a bigger reason to be an investor in something. Basic supply and demand. Finite and or limited supply. Large upcoming demand. Now, some of these stocks have moved. Some of them have not moved at all, really, or have even gone down. It's this very unique and wonderful situation to where by investing in some of these things, you don't even have to be crazy. but you can still be really early.